You're not allowed yet.
That's right, you're not allowed to talk yet.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome to the March 15th work session of the Roanoke County School Board. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Vice Chair, I make a motion to allow Mr. David Linden to join the Roanoke County School Board Budget Work Session on Tuesday, March 15th, 2022, electronically due to personal reasons. Second.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
Now you can speak.
Oh, thanks.
All right. We're heading to the only thing on the agenda, 2.01, 2022-23 Budget Work Session, Ms. Susan Peterson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having this special meeting. The good news is I have a minimum budget number. The bad news is the General Assembly adjourned without adopting a budget. So we're going to have to run with the lower of the House. It's the House version, but that's the lower of the two during crossover. So I was really hoping by now that they would have come to an agreement and we would be further along in the process. But let me show you what we do have from crossover, since we were unable to get to that last time. So we are going to look at state revenues just real quick on the agenda. I have a priority list, and included in the priority list are the different department requests that just didn't quite make it to the priority list, but I feel it's important for everyone to have the transparency of what is needed throughout the school division by the different departments. And then a quick look at the timeline that's left, which is dwindling quickly. So in your packets, if you lay them, so the crossover is top and the discussion of the crossover budget is at the bottom. That kind of might help you out as I go through this. On the screen, I have the same table that I shared when I provided the governor's budget in January. But I did add the columns for the House and the Senate. If you recall, on this schedule, the first column is the prior year budget. The second column is the governor's budget, what we were looking at in January. The third column of numbers is the House budget, and the last column is the Senate budget. The first group of numbers, once you get below the ADM and composite statistics, that first group of numbers down below is our general fund, which is our operating fund. We do get these monies broken up into different funding sources from the Commonwealth. We have SOQ funding, sales tax, they always break that out separate when we share this with you since it's such a large number. We have incentive funds. A lot of that relates to our bonus and compensation, categorical funds, lottery funds, and then some other kind of grant money that we get by participating in programs with VDOE. So the governor's budget gave us $5.9 million higher than last year's budget. The House budget gave us $5.6 million higher than the prior budget, so it actually went down a little bit. And then the Senate's budget gave us $8.1 million higher than the prior year budget. Some of the intricacies involved in these differences, the House budget has the sales tax being reduced for groceries and personal hygiene products. And then the Senate has the sales tax being reduced for personal hygiene products, and along with an exemption for veterinarians. And both of those do provide back under the incentive category. They do add back a hold harmless for the grocery tax, but they provide them in different amounts when they add them back. I did report previously, within your incentive is your compensation that they plan on funding. The governor had a 5% raise for both years of the biennium. The House provided a 4% raise for both years of the biennium, plus a 1% bonus in each of those years. And then the Senate had the same as the former governor. Moving on down, I believe when we get into the lottery funds, the early reading initiative, the governor had expanded this into grades 4 and 5. Both the House and Senate took this out and left it K-3. I've already mentioned the grocery tax hold harmless. So that's kind of the big happenings up in the operating fund. And then you can see the different pieces of the state monies that go into our other funds, our instructional resources fund, our tech replacement fund, our grant funds, nutrition fund, and our capital projects fund. One thing I would like to bring your attention to is when the governor issued his information in December, he provided the $5.5 million of grants for construction in his budget. The Senate left that in there. However, the House took it out and changed it to more of a loan process instead of a grant that we would be able to keep.
With that piece, the $5.5 million, was that going to be targeted to just capital projects?
Yeah, we included that
So it
in.
really, I guess, in thinking about our numbers from what the additional revenue would be, we really need to take that piece out, right? Because even if they were say, okay, we're gonna go with the governor or the Senate, that would be tied in some way to capital projects, not to an operating budget.
And we did budget it in the capital fund, and it was part of the CIP.
Okay,
And so what'll happen is if that goes away, I'll have to rewrite the CIP.
gotcha, okay.
What was the loan amount what were they structuring that as far as percentage wise? Do you remember?
I don't remember the
It's
minutia.
4% or something? I don't know.
Something, it was
Low-interest loans.
It was low interest.
and there was a little rebate in there, and it was like 3 or 4%.
Oh, okay.
You're very close. If you're not spot on, you're very close.
Okay.
So that's kind of the big minutia of what we're working with. So then, the only other thing I really have in the packet are our priority lists. And I'll try and make this bigger so you can see it on the screen. What are you doing, Chuck?
Problem with that cable, hold on. What's the cable?
It's the gremlins.
It's not my day to be up here, I guess. So we'll just start at the beginning, kind of walk down and provide you some of our thought process in pulling together the list. And since you completely took my computer away,
Hold on a second. I'm gonna swap the cable out, one pull out. Cable's been used a long time, it may be fine having it stay. Try not to see that works better. See if that holds.
lovely.
Man with a backup plan, I like that. Thank you.
Very fast switching that out, thank you. Okay, so the first section is going to reflect our revenue changes. We have the state revenues. I've got 2 columns listed, well, 3 columns. The first column is the House. It's circled in red because being conservative, that's the number that we would propose to build our budget on until we get the final General Assembly budget. The second column just shows what it would look like under the Senate and possible options under that budget if we get more funds. And then the last column is the total amount of that line item. So what you may see is, like the fleet replacement fund, the total amount may not be completely filled in, columns 1 and columns 2, but the third column's in there so you know how much the total amount is. So under the revenue changes, you can see the crossover revenues are listed first. The transfer from Roanoke County I believe this went up slightly from when we talked the last time, because I think when I shared it with you before, it was like 4.8 or something. They had a work session right after I spoke with you, and they sharpened their pencils and added some property taxes. And so our revenues did go up slightly from them increasing their taxes. So then the CSO, I had mentioned that before, that's just a flow through. They give us the money and they take it back out. So we just need to get that in the base budget. We took a hard look at some of our other local revenues, tuition that we charge for out-of-resident students. We did lower the rate. However, we must have attracted more students because the revenues that we're seeing are higher. And so we feel comfortable that we could add about 92,000 back in for the out-of-resident tuitions. Medicaid is some federal money that we apply for through some work that our OTs, PTs, and our special ed folks work tirelessly to report for us. We have pushed this almost to the limit, but we're adding a little bit more because we think there's a little more wiggle room in there. And then we are taking out 13,000 for rental income. This is a number where we used to have more churches that rented our facilities. We would keep part of the funds and return part of it to the school, and then whatever was left over back in its heyday was allocated to all of the schools. We've not been able to do that for several years. So we're reducing our budget because the revenue's not there for the two remaining schools.
No, it's not that we can't do it, we just haven't had churches asking to do it. So, like, at one point, we had like Elevation Church at Hidden Valley High School. Of course, they went to the Civic Center. So we still have, a couple churches that?
We have two,
Yeah.
one at Northside High and one at Northside Middle.
We just haven't had new ones who have
Okay.
asked, so.
And they're not as big. Elevation was our big church. And that's
Sure.
where all the funds came from, and they just outgrew us.
Is the revenue still split like I guess we set it up about 5 years ago?
That's how it was set up.
Yeah.
It was set up that way. We don't have enough to share at this point.
Well, from those schools, though.
Well, the schools get their third.
Yeah, right. And then the rest is, yeah, okay.
So then our total revenue increase will be either 3.4 or 5.9 million.
You mentioned about tuition. We still count them as ADMs, right? They'll be in our ADM, so we get that money in addition.
In addition to the tuition they pay. So that's a win-win for us.
Yeah.
So moving in, the way that I've kind of have a big laundry list, but I've tried to break it apart with some lines just to draw your attention to different groupings of information. The first line, the continuation of the 2021-2022 mid-year pay plan adjustments. If you recall, in January, we increased certain individuals at the bottom of the pay range. The amount to continue that for next year is going to be just over $2.4 million. So again, we didn't give them an individual raise, we just shifted them on the scale so they were in a higher spot on the scales. So then the next three sections provide, oh, and I forgot to take the words off the rest of it, Ken. We are having discussions on how we are going to format the raises, whether we're going to do steps or scale shifts and how that's going to come about. So I apologize, I've got some leftover language on here I meant to take off under the 6 and 7%. But we are looking at what we think we honestly could do is a 5, 6, or 7% raise. We have broken apart our teachers, because they're on a certain scale, our support staff, which would be on the non-teacher scale, and they are in DBM A11 through C43, and then all of our administrators, just so that you could see what the raises look like for each of those groups. So in the House budget, we think we can get at least a 5%. We might be able to squeeze 6% by cutting down below, but we would want to take a hard thought process of what we would want to take out down below. And some of those items are checked as we go through. You can think about that.
So here, can we take just a pause to, because I think it's important for folks that are going to be watching this to understand that when we're saying this 5%, 6%, whatever it is, to understand, I know a lot of us have heard 14%. That's not the reality of most school divisions, and I'm not sure, I don't understand theirs, and so I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, I don't know. But I know that you've shared with us that the other localities are in the 3 to 5% range, if I'm speaking correctly.
Yeah, Montgomery right now is looking at at least what they've shared our last meeting, where they're trying to do an average of 3 to 3.5%. They're struggling to get to the 5%, which is what, the state basically is that reimbursement amount. Also, the other thing to point out is, the state budget's always, of course, built through that biennium. So, whatever budget comes through possibly could be 5% each year. So that's another thing to be mindful of, is we'd like to next year position ourselves to be able to do that again, the 5%, and take advantage of that full overall 10% over 2 years. I say that to say, because sometimes if you shut yourself in the first year too far, you might wind up not be able to give much next year, and then you lose out. So just something to be mindful of. But everybody around is pretty much, in that 5% raise range is what they're saying. Of course, Roanoke City was the outlier, and right now they're still saying they think they can do that. And again, they must have, basically they've said no matter what the state does, they have a way to do it. So I'm not really sure, what that is. They were looking at, that was for teachers, and then and whoever's on that scale, but they were looking at a 6 to 8% for their admin or support or whatever. I know Botetourt was looking at doing 5% across the board, except for like their classified, which they didn't do, I don't think, like we did this year, and give that mid-year adjustment for kind of our classified range.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. That's a big distinction.
Yeah.
We've already kind of.
I think it's important to point out,
Yes.
right, that we've
Which
done
was the
that.
2.4.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just important to point out, I think.
Right.
And then 5% is what I'm hearing in Franklin County, and so forth. I think Salem, what I'm hearing is planning on starting out at 5%, and they're going to go back to maybe the city council to see if they can, depending on what the state does, see if they can do more on that, everything below sort of your admin range, see if they can do more to try to, stay lined up with the city. That's kind of what I'm hearing right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just think that's important to, for people to hear that, you hear the upper level
Sure.
noise, but it's reality that we're dealing with.
Right, right.
Now, you'll probably get into what we could do and if there was an opportunity for a bonus, is that correct? Did you calculate that?
Or, I don't think we've really looked at a bonus per se, but if we could do like a higher percentage in certain categories, she's gonna go through that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So the way that the spreadsheet's laid out, we do have a balanced budget going to the House. So the revenues and everything in that square box do balance to the expenditures. As we go through, we've built in the 5% raise for the House budget. We think we could squeak out, move in at least our teachers and support staff up to the 6% by maybe taking away those items that have the check marks by them.
Rough calculation, you've got to get to about $1 billion to get to 6% on what Susan has listed as teachers, and then support A11 through C43. And that's, again, basically everybody below the assistant principal range. So not only your teachers, but of course your tradespeople, your mechanics, your speech pathologists, your nurses, your behavioral specialists. I mean, anybody that falls kind of below that range. So
Just to clarify, you're saying the A11 to C43, or is that?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, C44 is where you start with your assistant
Admin.
principals and
Okay,
yeah.
right. Gotcha.
So it would cost about $1 million to get that group to the 6%. It's about $7. If it didn't, to breaking it out, teachers alone, that scale would be about $700,000 to get that to 6%. Another $300,000 to get that support group to 6%. So you're right at $1 million. So what we did here was just kind of checked some areas that would add up to about $1 million that we would have to sort of eliminate off the recommended expenditures on the House version if, if the desire was to try to at least get that piece up to the 6%. But the balanced budget that Susan has there in the red column is all based on the 5% across the board based on the House version right now.
Okay.
You got, if you take out fleet replacement fund and your instructional resource fund, which I don't know everything that's involved, but that's about 700,000.
Correct. Those are about the two big items there that you get to, and then the rest of it is trying to make up the difference there, so. None of it's easy,
No,
yeah.
So you're looking at $1 million for 6% and probably 2 for 7%, I'm assuming. And maybe you're,
I didn't add that up, but probably. That
I
sounds
mean,
about
I don't
right.
even think we're close
Yeah.
to that.
yeah, but you're looking at 2 million for 7 if you did those. Okay.
Yeah, and we put the increments in there, they're in the far right-hand column of what it would cost for the 6% and 7% raises.
Oh, I
for
didn't
each
see
of those.
anything in that. I got you. It's over here still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Susan was saying, where you look at the 6% group and the 7% group, just ignore that language about no step and scale shift, because those are things we haven't determined yet. So we were thinking about those things, but just ignore that for now and just focus on the overall big picture, and then we'll figure out how to get there as far as what it
Gotcha.
looks like, so,
Yeah, I started to take it out, and then I didn't
yeah.
get to the second two groups. Because we've had a lot of discussions, Dr. Nicely, Mr. Bradshaw, Dr. McClung and I, about our skills and how they interrelate and how we can get skills higher and the impacts on the employees. And so these discussions are continuing, and the numbers that you have in front of you include just a flat, that percent for every single employee. Since we were looking at possibly being creative this next year, we just went with a flat percent for every employee.
So we had these discussions a little bit yesterday on, we did this 6 years ago with the full compensation study. 4 years ago, I think we updated it except for teachers. And so I'm not sure that, as we discuss, maybe we get by this budget, but I think it would be a good discussion to talk about. I don't know if you go back to that one or just do a new compensation study to see.
Yeah, and the way you described it, I think, is pretty accurate in terms of because the last one was really, if you remember, that desire to focus on the employees in those kind of support classified sort of positions, just trying to figure out how do we get people in those jobs, and where are we in terms of the market and that kind of thing. So, of course, the whole, the bands were developed and all that, but the focus was really there. It wasn't much done to look at how does the teacher scale relate and all of that. So it's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah.
yeah, 4 years, that's pretty, to me, outdated when you come to times with money and things, the budgets that we have now.
Well, then by the time you do it and then, try to implement it, that's one thing that happened last time is, it all hit right when COVID hit. And so even though it came out with, here's the recommendation, we had to then put it off. So then how current are your numbers at that point too, when you put something off for a year, so.
Well, and we've seen that slide a little bit, which is concerning, and we've talked about that a little bit. For the starting, we want to try and work on that, and you've got some ideas on that.
And there are different
But-
ways to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of it's philosophical. I mean, and just, I think it's worth going through this real quickly if you like, and that is, when people are, let's say you're fresh out of college and want to go into teaching, you might look at that beginning number, and it's like, not really paying attention to things like health insurance benefits and other things. You see that beginning number without looking at the rest. Our scale is built on kind of a median, and then kind of works its way out. So, for example, if you compare ours to like Montgomery County, their starting is about $4,000 more than ours this year. But by the time you get to the median, we're about the same, and it's just because ours does have that sort of incremental step. You don't have these sort of plateaus, and that's what, I'm not picking on other divisions, but I'm saying, that is another way of doing that, is to get those beginning salaries up if you want to attract and recruit. I mean, that's one way to do it, but it means probably having to plateau a little bit before you then jump again. Ours currently has those steady increments, But again, that's philosophical in terms of what is the best in terms of recruiting and retaining
Yeah.
quality employees.
Well, I definitely think the scale should shift, because the starting pay, if you're gonna keep it at 40,000 and you keep moving up and up, I mean, we're not gonna stay competitive, so we definitely have to keep shifting the scale, and I think that's at the beginning of the scale as well as at the end of the scale.
That's a great point. And that's actually one reason I think our starts a little lower, and that's because, again, we're built, I think, to the median. I think I'm describing this correctly. You start at the median, and if you're doing those increments, well, if you're doing that steadily, that means you're going a little higher, a little lower, versus other folks might say, we're gonna kind of, artificial's the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying, get that starting point up, and then, like, you're not gonna get much, but it's just, again, different ways of building it, but it's something we can look at and discuss.
What's the average length of time an employee stays an employee in Roanoke County Public Schools?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
We pulled that data at one point, and I know we have a whole lot of teachers that are between the 10 and 25-year range. That's our bulk of our teachers, which is why if you look at our scale, median-wise, we're very, very competitive, and we want to keep and attract those teachers, if you will. So again, it's another philosophy that Dr. Nice was saying, we either try to attract the brand-new teacher, or do we try to attract that maybe 5 to 15-year teacher coming into our system? So you can look
Given
at
that
things a lot
most
more.
teachers probably come out of school and then get to their childbearing ages and maybe want to drop out, incentivizes them perhaps to stay. Yeah.
Well, and even at the start, $4,000, like you mentioned, is 10%. That's a lot when you're making $40,000 a year.
Right, that's what you
That's
say.
a
Yeah, so
huge,
You have to weigh that.
Right. Yeah, and again, it's hard, fresh out of college, for example, to kind of look ahead. Well, but if you stick with us for 10 years,
Right.
it's hard to see.
as long as you can put food on the table for the next time. I
Exactly,
mean,
it's
'cause
gotta
that's the
get
difference
there.
in making 100,000
No,
versus
that's right.
40,000.
Yeah, no, that's right, that's right.
I think of it as clickbait.
Yeah.
That's really what it
It
is.
is. It's
It really
clickbait. Get
is.
'em
It's-
in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to revamping that metric for that specific reason.
Would we, I guess, of course, we got to get through the budget,
Right.
but then we would look at this, maybe have someone redo really, like we have in a.
Yeah, go back to one of those
Consultant.
consultants, right? and
Yeah.
Have them come in, and we actually, the Gallagher group, we sort of have an ongoing relationship if we have questions or whatever, so would you have to put an RFP back out, or what'd you have to do
I don't know the answer to that.
to figure that out?
Yeah.
Was that the one that did ours 6 years ago?
That was an Evergreen.
Evergreen was-
Used them.
Yeah, I didn't recognize
They,
the name.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
does that cost? We're gonna have to put that in the budget.
Right. Yeah.
Do we use?
To revamp that,
How much? 75, 80? Yeah.
Yeah.
but I think if we were just doing the
It's a
teacher
big
side of
deal.
it,
They bring people in. It's
Oh,
a
yeah,
really big.
it's not cheap.
Right, you have to look at it more comprehensively, I think, but, yeah.
All right, the crystal ball. And
I
you're
wish.
You're you're a wizard that looks at it,
And
I
we're holding
guess.
you to this.
I don't
too.
know if Susan gets
We're
paid
holding
enough
you.
to make these calls.
We're gonna pick up probably a little bit more.
I would hope so.
So, thinking ahead, we're looking at, percentages that make a big difference. Which maybe not cutting or, getting up to 6 to maybe more, I don't, whatever, but, I think, it seems like it always sort of happens that way. Now, this year, I don't know, but that we squeak out another million or so.
Well, last year, I think the final General Assembly came down, and it was the first year they'd given us more than either the Senate or
Senate or
the
the
House.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what to expect. I think there are some significant ideological differences at this point, so I have no idea how they're going to resolve.
So we want to give every dime that we can, we know that.
I would love to.
Exactly. And this is not that this matters a great deal, but this is the past governor's budget, right? That's the numbers that are presented.
Well, his would be what's in the governor's column.
Right.
Originally, but the House and the Senate have now taken them, changed them all up. So I think that's why you see your ideological differences coming out, because the House is much lower, and that one would take into consideration. I think the current governor's desire to provide more of a tax refund to the citizens of Virginia, where your Senate is much higher, and I think the person who's putting forth that budget feel more compelled to fund programs like K-12 that have been underfunded via, fake support
Unfunded
caps.
mandates. Okay.
And I don't have a crystal
So
ball, I
one,
sure do
so
wish
one
I did.
approach would be, and we can go through any of the list of expenditures there, that you want to go through, but just kind of setting the stage, one approach would be, again, that red column presents a balanced budget based on that 5% across the board. We could, if we get more money, kind of by consensus, I mean, you have to vote on what you have, but then if we came back and amend, at that point, you could say, well, if we came back and amend, we would want to, try to do more on the compensation side, in those categories as a possibility. The other option, if there was a desire to go ahead and try to do that somewhat on the, this initial round, we would have to probably go to those checked items in order to make that happen. And then if we got more money, I guess you could always put those back, but it's just two different approaches that you could, kind of go with. That, either way, we got to balance the budget, so,
So you have Plan A, Plan B,
right,
which is never a bad plan.
sure, yeah, right.
And Plan A is always our most conservative.
That's right.
Yeah, and if you, like I said, if you want to talk about any of those items in terms of what the different things are, we can certainly go down the list. And then Susan has another list in terms of other requests that we had that are not on here. So, and that's important to kind of say, I think you already said this, just know that there's always more needs that didn't even make it to this list. I mean,
Oh,
just
yeah.
to be aware of.
So, just being a little green myself, the Instructional Resources Fund, that's the largest ticket item on here, $385,000. You get rid of that, what are you getting rid of exactly?
Right, well, I'll let you explain.
That is where we set aside funds to purchase, textbooks and online subscriptions for our
Because a lot of it's
classrooms.
digital now, but it's still intellectual property, it's still textbooks, just online.
Yeah.
So we put money toward that. If we don't keep up with that, we can sometimes get ourselves into a pinch where it's an adoption year, and we don't have funds to buy everything we need to.
Okay.
But if we didn't do that for now, it would probably be okay. I mean, it's not gonna be a dire consequence kind of situation right now. It's just that, it's one of those things, you kick the can down the road, it just means you gotta pick that back up, like in next year's budget or what have you,
Yeah.
so.
And for many years, we never could fully adopt whichever subject that was up for adoption. We adopted it, we couldn't purchase all the materials for it. During COVID, we ended up saving some funds from the 2020 budget and being able to set aside a bunch so that we could implement our first, adoption and purchase all the materials to support it, and that was the English program. And here, we're starting to set aside funds for the next one on the list. I don't have the
Okay.
list in front of me to tell you exactly which subjects would be affected.
And then my next question would be the fleet replacement. That seems pretty important to me, especially with parts and labor and getting equipment
Right.
nowadays.
And that full figure you see is what we would normally put aside. And again, it's that whole, let's put money toward it so you don't have these fiscal cliffs. Really, to do that, we'd be looking at the 1.1 million. Susan put in the 324, this is sort of initial budget. It's good to keep up with that and keep replacing your fleet
Just don't
based
wanna
on
be
mileage and years purchased. I will say again, we
started that about
overall do
5
pretty
years
well
ago,
with that.
so that
So if we had to, that is an area where we can put it off and not jeopardize, safety or anything, because our buses are in good shape, thank goodness. But we don't want, again, that's not something you want to make a habit of. That is also an area, I believe, that we would be allowed to, with year-end money, that counts as capital. So I know last year, we were able to come back and use some year-end money to do what we didn't do in the budget. That's always an option, too.
The last question I have, fuel, I know you don't have that checked, but did you project for a higher number? I know we probably buy at a certain rate to start, you have a
Right,
contract, but, I mean,
So-
this isn't gonna stop.
Do we hedge?
That's made up
Do we
of
hedge
3
that?
different types of fuel in the transportation department. It's propane, which is teeny, I think maybe $4,000 of that increase. And that is contractual, and we calculate exactly how much we would need. Diesel is the largest number. We have a locked contract with our vendor We have locked in a 2.67 rate. And so the largest chunk of this is going to save us for next year. We're still have about 100,000 that we had to put in for the diesel to get us up to that because we were maybe 2.52 or something in the current school year. And so we do have to set aside a little more money to meet that contractual obligation for our lock rate. Where we're gonna have a problem with diesel is in FY '24, when we lock in our rates at these 4.5, 4.25 levels, we're gonna face a significant jump and we're gonna need money that year. And then gasoline, we did estimate the amount of purchases. I just used $5 because I had no idea what to use. So that is, the gasoline price is probably our fuzziest price, but the other two are spot on what we will end up purchasing.
Just wonder if we create some type of a fund for that, or no?
I think that's I mean, I think these locked-in contract rates kind of take care of that, but this is a very volatile time, obviously, with fuel costs.
So you're locked in for 1 to 2 year contracts? Is that how it works?
We lock in the past year for next year. And so next year we'll lock in for FY '24.
Wish we could save some of that and sell it. We could pay next year's budget.
Yes, yes.
Chris, was this about replace, how many buses? What does it do?
So the, I gave you a presentation in January of
Yeah.
our fleet replacement plan. We went back and took a hard look at it, and we're gonna have to revamp it a little bit.
Yeah.
We are behind, because there are several years we could not make the purchases that we needed to. I think, Ms. King has informed us that we're about 41 behind where we should be in buying the buses, but they're not that extremely old. We're probably about 5 or 6 years out, so instead of them being on 15 years like we have them, they may be up to about 20 years old. But on the whole, most of our buses are within 15 years.
Don't we still project about 10 a year? Isn't that what we usually look at buying,
So that got
the buses?
switched up under a prior director of operations. And the fleet replacement plan is supposed to reflect what our needs are. And we've always had ups and downs in our purchases. And so the transfer that I put in smooths that out. They don't have to purchase it 10 each year, right?
Okay.
We smooth that out with the transfer itself. So the prior person changed that on us, and we didn't realize it, which is why we're a little further behind than we thought. But that did come to our attention, and it is something that we know we need to work on. Ms. King and Mr. Lowe have helped to come up with a better, more accurate picture. And so when we present the final budget, that fleet plan will be tweaked a little bit, and it will show that we're going to need to buy, I think we're attempting to build in 9 buses for FY '23, and then 15 buses for the next 3 years to try and catch us back up.
Are they gonna be the diesel?
Yes, sir.
Because we don't have much luck on getting through the mountains with some of these, right?
Okay, yeah.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Do y'all want any other specific, just to let you know, I can walk through line by line if you desire. The 2 blue pages are really kind of what we have on the priority list of administration really thinks this needs to be done. And then the kind of tan pages, those are additional requests from the departments that we certainly would love to fit in, but they didn't rise to the priorities that the other items did. And so as you look through there, if you have questions, we can certainly walk through all of them, or I don't want to, y'all listen to me enough, I don't want to.
Where did the federal funds, Easter, and did we were able to do any room for our, resource?
So we actually did, if you recall, Mr. Granway asked about the nurses at a recent meeting, and we did go back and take a look at that. And so what we found out is that there is a need to keep 3 of the 5 nurses that we put into the grant. So for FY '23, we're taking those out. We also had set aside a large amount of money for contact tracing. We're taking that out. So what we're going to put into the grant when we take those pieces out are 5 reading specialists at the middle schools, which will be really helpful with that learning loss. We are also putting the special ed retention and recruitment stipend that would really help us keep our special ed teachers for next year.
Anything in the 3 to 5 range? Grades 3 to 5?
Anything additional?
Well, with those funds, we can maneuver those. And, you know, obviously, that's, when we looked at the, you know, charts and regressions and whatnot, 3 to 5 was an area of concern.
Reading.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we could, for example, instead of doing the 5 reading specialists for all 5 middle schools, we could do like 3 of them or something and kind of share if we wanted to, and then try to get a couple math specialists or something for
Is there a way to?
elementary.
Is there a way to do some split time? I mean, do we need, I think we need them everywhere. I'm not trying to minimize that, but I'm worried that if we don't hit that 3 to 5 grade range, you know, if they don't get the fundamental start.
Yeah, absolutely. If it'd be okay, can we go back and work with Ms. Hogan to say, okay, what do we already have in that range? And to see, are there
Sure.
additional things needed, you know, as opposed to those middle school reading specialists, which I know they've requested. So we could, if we could look at it that way, we could certainly do that.
Okay.
So we did put in continuing 11 of our teachers in elementary,
Remediation teacher.
our remediation teachers. So
How many?
that's in a,
11?
yeah.
Okay.
They'll be
That's
shared.
why I say,
between
I know they're already getting that, so if we need something, if it be,
I'd love to
And we added-
visit that.
I think 1 or 2 or 3 math specialists. I can't remember off the top of my
I
head.
thought we'd already done that, yeah.
But yeah, so we have added some through those additional smaller ARPA set-asides.
Okay.
You know, I do have concerns as kids who maybe didn't have nursery school last year because of COVID, and then they're coming in as kindergartners. I think we're going to see those kids, the kindergartners and first graders, really suffering the most. Everything that I've read in the Education Weekly stuff, that's the population I'm seeing that we're going to really need to be ready to get those kids, because if they don't have the fundamentals to read kindergarten, first grade, we've lost those kids.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's
and-
the issue, yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
We don't even know what's coming,
It's the
especially
3
with the
to 5 group
masks.
that we didn't get to go
Phonetics.
every day.
Yeah, if you can't read,
I agree with you
you don't
totally.
make it.
Right.
I mean, that's just the way it
Well, and
is.
one of the huge losses from last year was not even in that K2 range. It wasn't that they weren't there every day, it was just we were having to pull, you know, our reading specialists and all the other resources in order to spread people out and make that work. So they didn't get to do their small group reading like they would normally do. They didn't have their reading specialists brought to bear. That, of course, has changed this year. But it's not going to be a, you know, 1-year fix. Absolutely, to your point. We
This
need
is
to
gonna
keep
be a
at that. We
long
know those
term,
things work,
yeah.
but we definitely need to keep at that. Make sure they have the resources to do it.
And I think we need to see the measurements so that we see that we are improving and not
Good
sitting
point.
still. Remediation is so important. And if we don't, you know, monitor it, measure it, and make sure that we, you know, I think we ought to get a report to, you know, probably every meeting to see where we are on the scale now.
Well, I think that RISE program is very impressive.
Yes.
And at some point, I'd love to see that. I don't know how we can do this, Ken, but I'd love to see it go county-wide. I know it was only at certain schools, but that program specifically looks at assessment, reassessment, progress. It takes
Right.
kids that are kind of in the middle.
It's very structured and very,
Yeah.
very personalized. I mean, the kids rotate them on their groups, and it's very labor intensive too to do it, but it absolutely works. Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
So is this is things that we're not gonna do? Is that what you were telling me?
Yes.
Correct. If it's in tan, it's not on the list to do.
All right. Well, one question I have, so maintenance of the HVAC system, 110,000. I know that's one of the biggest complaints that we get from our building administrators, the HVACs are constantly down. Is this going to severely affect what we need to do to keep those up and running reliably?
What is that for?
Mostly for price increases of equipment and materials.
We should be able to make that up with other funds.
We think we can absorb some of it in the budget.
Okay.
And we also, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, if we're having a time of reflection on this, there is one item in here that we're checking, that we're taking off to make the raises work. And it's not a big ticket item, but it's one that, you guys tell me if I'm off on this. But I know from our athletic director at the high school, there's never, or there's rarely, an 8-hour day. It's usually, by the time they come back for the sports and stuff, it's 10, 12-hour, sometimes. Now, maybe they get some time off during the day, I don't know. But, going from that 7 to 8 hours basically makes them full-time, I guess. It's $58,000. Does anybody else have,
Well, we think
Yeah.
we should leave it on there. And you don't have to do any of those checked items to balance that budget. It's balanced at 5%.
so the checked items are still,
Yes, sir.
we're
It's
still good on
balanced.
those? I got
It
you.
was
I thought you were
6%.
pulling that out.
No, sir.
No.
It was checked only because I know there was some discussion about, hey, for some of these groups, we'd like to bump up that increase.
If we go to 6%.
Only reason I would check those is say those are places you'd have to go to get there.
So we're good on that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if we go
Oh,
5%.
okay. I
If we
got
get
you.
more money, then we can look at.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So
That's-
then to Cheryl's point, we're going to the 324, we're not kicking it out.
No.
It's going from 1.1 to 324 on the
Wait.
transportation, I'm sorry, the fleet replacement.
Oh, right.
So these-
If we get more money, then we can put more toward that, or we can put it toward the, whatever.
That's what, the
But,
checks are where you're looking to put more money if needed.
well,
No.
the checks are
No.
really, if you, on the red column budget, as a group, if you said, hey, we really feel like we need to get to, like for the teachers and support
Oh, I
piece,
got you,
to
the
that
bonus.
6% on the initial budget, those are places you'd have to cut, I think, to get there.
So we're going to 7 to 8 hours in this budget.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay.
At
Makes sense.
5%.
That makes sense.
Everything in the red column balances right now. Ignore the checks.
I got you, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
At the
Okay.
5%, and then the crystal ball is gonna get us a little more.
The crystal ball's gonna come forward through for us and.
Well, and mind you, there's a whole nother list in the yellow section.
Yeah.
There is.
And our grand total there is what, 737?
737,
Almost a,
738.
Well, and that's.
Actually, it's
And
more
this
than
is-
that. That 737 is
That's just
only
for-
the facilities and
Yeah,
operations.
and that's what I was gonna
I didn't
ask.
put an actual total for
oh,
it.
yeah,
didn't
you
do
didn't
it.
even put a total.
Chris, are you comfortable with the things that are on this list that we're axing? Is there something in here that you foresee that we absolutely need to keep our buildings in good shape? Because we know the aging infrastructure and what we're trying to do with that, but also with that comes,
Gosh.
keeping the building running safely and effectively for our kids and staff. And I see you've got 6 different requests for employees here. Are we able to operate efficiently with what we have in terms of your HVAC technicians and plumber and like you were requesting for a supervisor of maintenance?
Yes, sir. Those positions that we were asking for was based off of a department plan to go into a zone maintenance eventually down the line. That was something that we presented last year, and it's just, it's basically adding to make, to give more, give each school their own basic maintenance team. And we're just not there yet, obviously, budget-wise, to be able to do that, manpower-wise.
To desire it is to get to a proactive stance versus reactive fix. And one reason we keep it on here in front of everybody is to say, we need to do that. I mean, that's where we need to be, that's where we'd like to be, just so we don't forget it. So we definitely want to keep it in front of you.
What's the fire code compliance maintenance? Down at the
So that
bottom.
would be basically, fire extinguishers, lighting, emergency lighting, that's upgrading all of those items that our fire marshal inspects every 90 days or so. He writes us up on different, minor variations and that stuff that it costs, money, so that would just be basically, materials cost to replace a lot of that stuff, so it doesn't come right out of the existing maintenance budget. We actually have a line item for just that.
Okay, I was making sure we weren't going to be out of compliance.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So this is probably about
Quick
$4 million.
question, it's hard for me to see on my phone, what is the line item figure for the retention bonus for special ed and that we did last year? What is that projected for this year?
It's 587, and it's planned on being put into the ARPA ESER 3 grant.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So it's $3 to $4 million probably here, but you didn't, not total up on this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying. I mean, it's not that any of that's easy to forego. I mean, I think our folks do a good job of being thoughtful in terms of things that we ought to increase and need to, and it's just, so I never want to take any of those things lightly. It's, it's a matter of just, you got this much money and you have to figure out what are the must-dos versus the, would like to do's, and
Show me the money.
never easy, yeah.
How much of, I guess, ESSER funds, you just said a grant, so what, in a nutshell, is still out there that we can use?
We've allocated it all. I've brought it all to the board and presented plans
Right.
to allocate it all. The amounts that we used in here to reallocate to cover the special ed stipend and the reading specialists were really purely because the health plan changed, and the need to have nurses perform that contact tracing after hours, and as much as they were working, as hard as they were working, because they were really working hard. It was really nice to have that funding in there to compensate them for that. But that's not going to be needed anymore, so we just redirected that to help balance our current budget.
With IAs, are we having a hard time, are we pretty close to full on that position?
I'd say we're always needing.
We're always needing some, we are pretty full, we're probably needing, Josie can answer this directly, but I'm saying probably 5 or 6 right now.
Okay.
But we're definitely going to recover what we have.
That's a
There's
lot
always a
better.
need, and it changes with the need of the kids moving
Okay.
out.
Well, and that's an area we did that mid-year increase this year, which helps, and then we can do something again. Keep boosting that bottom line up there.
Right, that's why I was looking at that line. I mean,
Yeah,
going
a
from
lot better
186 to
than where we were.
88.
And we made it a little bit easier for someone to be an IE, right?
Yes.
Rather than some of the requirements we had before.
In this, do we have anything that's addressing the cafeteria workers? I know we're really short on them.
So on the small page, if you will, actually, let me go back here. We do have near the bottom of that, the continuation of the, well, and I put all of the raises in here, I didn't mean to do that. The continuation of the mid-year pay plan would be $518,000 that they can absorb with their revenues. And then they would end up getting whatever the division, so I should have put in the first column, I should have just put the 5% raise. Sorry, this is what happens to me when I'm preparing it.
So in
5
the
minutes before
first
I walk in the door.
column, ignore the 197 and the 228.
Correct,
It's just the 165 is what this is built on.
correct.
We don't have anything addressing like starting pay.
It depends, because, we're still in discussions as to what to do with the scale. If we did a scale shift of 5% and didn't give people a step, then that would get their starting pay up above 15. So, I think there's additional discussion that needs to be had.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're
regarding
50, I
that.
think it was 50 down or something like that.
In the 40s, I was
Yeah,
thinking.
I mean, we can't keep going that way. And from everybody that I've spoken with and the nutritional managers, I think pay was the biggest incentive. So it might be something we need to talk about as a board.
And we did go back and poll all of the nutrition associates. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but 32 of them said that they would take the health insurance at the full-time rate.
How many do we have total, do you know?
We polled, I think 80, we have 82, I think 70 some responded.
Okay.
So you are going to be able to offer the insurance.
That they would take it.
About half
Yeah,
of it,
I
or
think so.
roughly about 40%.
Yeah.
That's better than the bus driver deal.
I think we will see
And
more.
participation.
Right.
It's a big deal for people.
It is.
It is. And it'll be good to be able to return it back to this group. They're the last group that it was taken away from.
Right. Isn't that nice? I mean, that's a big deal, to be able to say as a board, we've given those benefits back. Yeah, that's a big deal, I think.
Yeah, got to do something to address the shortage. And just reward them for their hard work.
And then we also have the retention bonus and the recruitment bonus on here for the nutrition fund as well. So they have been very forward-thinking in ways that we can attract quality employees.
And just, as far as like the spring interviewing, recruiting right now, I mean, at the elementary level, we've got a good candidate pool. So that's going pretty well. Secondary, it's your traditional hard to find. I mean, secondary math positions are pretty tough to find, Some of the other, what are some of the other ones you're looking for, Jim? I know that's a big one.
Yeah, that's the main one. We've got a couple CTE areas that are difficult, but they're difficult every year. And then we have one foreign language position right now that we're still looking for, so hopefully we'll be able to fill that. I'm confident we can fill that.
It's Spanish, I think, so,
It is, correct.
What about bus
I
drivers?
might have to help out.
Are we still really struggling with bus drivers?
Yeah.
That's something else we probably need to look at.
I have a question. So regarding the online learning, how many teachers, do we need to expand our teachers for that? And how many kids do you project will do the RCPS online this coming year? Any ideas on that?
For the online academy you're talking about, high
Uh-huh.
school?
Yeah.
That's done kind of separately in terms of how it's staffed. Can you
It's a
speak to that
little
at
bit of
all?
both.
Okay.
I build in staff right now to help offset some of those online courses. If we have teachers that can cover extra blocks or things like that, that is built into our current staffing, as well as extra supplements to those teachers that'll do these classes outside of the work hour, if you will.
So like classes like, I'm just using econ and personal finance. We always have so many students who want to do that. We can literally, I think Randy Boone
He
probably does that full
He
time. So where we can, we have the numbers, we'll build that into our staffing, which goes into our, this part of the budget. And then, like you said, if there's some one-offs where it's just one extra class of, then maybe an existing teacher will take that on for an additional stipend to teach. That's kind of how it works.
Okay.
And we are seeing growth in there,
That's-
which
yeah.
is one of the reasons we have staffed it a little bit differently, just to try to compensate for some of that. So it is, if you will, saving the division money, but still offering the courses that we need to offer.
I was just thinking in terms of math shortages at that secondary level. If that's been more beneficial because you can do some of those online.
We can do some of those online. The problem is your face-to-face is the absolute best way to
Yeah.
teach math like that. So we try if at all possible to give them a one-to-one teacher, not one-to-one, but a class teacher that's there. And I still am confident we're gonna be able to hire for all these positions. I really am. I just, it is one of our tighter candidate pools, if you will, right now.
Okay. Most people can make more money being an engineer than a math teacher.
Right. I mean, if you think about what it takes to, I was a math major for a while until I switched, and, I mean, just think about what it takes to graduate with a math degree, and then, I mean, you can find more lucrative fields, so it's, yeah, you really appreciate those who choose to go into teaching.
It's usually the retirees that come back.
We rely heavily on them if they'll come back.
Was
and
that
get it, so
before or after you went to Nicaragua?
That was before.
Just wanted to see if that changed you.
Yeah, that was before.
David, are you listening?
He went to the bathroom.
David, are you there?
Way to call him out,
I'm here.
Okay, just making sure you're not skiing or something.
No, not yet. It's golf next.
Hey, so
Golf course.
we have factored in here, and I think we've got to work on this. I don't know if you'd be okay with our vice chair, if you want to wait till you get back, or Dr. Nicely. We still need to send a board of supervisors to figure out what they're doing. We've budgeted the extra 100,000 for the 17, but we don't know what they're doing. We don't know if that includes BCAT. We don't know where we stand on any of that. I know we're supposed to have a joint meeting in April, and I'm sure they're ready to meet with us. So have you had any correspondence, or is there any movement in that respect to know what we're doing? Is 17-17
Well,
the number?
I think that they are leaning heavily towards 17, 17, 17. I don't think it's gonna go any higher than that, so I think that 100,000 is gonna be accurate. I have not gotten, any clear response on whether that's gonna include BCAT or whether that's gonna be outside. I know that they would like to see it outside of that. It's just figuring out how it's gonna get paid for.
Okay, so 17-7, you feel like that's a good number?
I do, yeah, I think that's accurate. And Susan's probably had conversations, or maybe Ken's had conversations.
Okay,
If they think differently, I mean, based on what I've heard from the couple board members that I've spoken with, that sounds like where they're gonna end up.
okay.
That pretty much reflects what we've been told on the
Yeah,
staff
that's
side.
what I assumed is there. So, okay, so we need, if we can get that joint meeting back on, so we know what we're doing there because we need, we really need, we've got a committee out there doing the work too. This is kind of getting off task just a little bit, but it reflects to the budget. But it also reflects to our CIP to be able to know what we're doing moving forward as well. So, but if we can get that joint meeting in April to lay down some of this, because we got the committee out there that's doing work, I just think we're in limbo right now. So we just need to know what their thinking is so we can continue to move forward. And, and I know we need to find
Yeah,
out about
I'll
the
touch
options and
base with
stuff.
their chair and see if we can pick a date there in April that they're ready to meet by then.
Sounds good.
Hopefully their budget numbers are in and we can get a better idea of what they're thinking.
Thank you. And thank y'all for this. I know this is, and you got 5 of us asking you for all different things and trying to pull this way and that way. But thank y'all for getting this together. So,
Certainly.
So we have another meeting. Is that
20.
optional, or we?
So originally, I had scheduled the March 22 meeting thinking we would have the final General Assembly budget. We can still meet if there's any work you would like us to do on what has been presented to you. If you want any numbers changed or us to investigate anything with the pay plan or whatever, we can certainly do any legwork to come back with any sharpened numbers for you at that meeting. But I don't think we're gonna have any other revenue numbers by then.
So March 24th, we'll have to bring the budget as an action item for you to adopt, to meet the requirement. So barring, basically what I hear you saying is barring any, new information before that, we'll be looking at this, what's in the red box there, the House version.
Right, and you're confident we will not get any more information between now and March 24th?
Well, that's out of my hands.
Okay. I mean, is this typical that we wouldn't know
Um,
kind of
Been
hard
that
to.
way for a while.
yeah,
We've had
Yeah.
one year that, in recent years, we've had one that they didn't
I think
adopt.
they were so far apart, is
Yeah.
kind of what I'm hearing, so.
we've had a couple years where we've known, but it's, like you said,
I
maybe
mean,
the last
I think
few years,
typically we
last
do know,
minute, yeah.
but
it's been
Yeah,
down to the
we
wire.
usually would know pretty much
So-
before we send it over.
yeah,
So you usually do know.
we do. And in
Yeah.
recent years, I think there's been more divisiveness.
Okay.
Well, here's my thing, if we can, and I think several of us, or all of us maybe, are in agreement on, if we can do better, if we find out the number changes. I mean, we could always call an emergency meeting or a quick meeting or something like that, but they have to do it by the end of March. Is that the day, or is it?
We have,
We
Well, I
have
know
to
we
hand
do.
ours
I know we
over.
do. But how about the General Assembly?
No.
I don't know.
Because they've got to balance the budget, right? So
They do, but I'm not sure that they've ever necessarily,
Had
they've
this
gone
situation.
past that before. I mean, we've gotten the final budget from them
Okay.
much later.
Has the governor, you heard any, we don't know when he'll call them back,
I don't know.
because he'll
Heard
call
that.
session back, and that's probably when they'll do it.
Well, we had run into a couple of our legislators last week at the Cave Spring game. They thought they were continuing to work this week, so I'm not really sure.
I know, that's what we asked, that's the first question was, where are you on the budget?
this is where we're at
All
for
right,
now.
so we do what we can. We have Plan A,
Yeah.
and then we have Plan B.
Yeah.
Yep, and then we give more. if we
Never a
can.
bad plan.
Is there a consensus that, in terms of building out, a budget based on higher amounts we might get, is there a consensus or desire to look at those, at least the teacher and the support A11, to try to get that to, 6% or more? Is that
For those
is that
two
kind of what the
pieces,
desire
yes.
is?
Yep, yeah.
If we get more.
I would definitely support that.
Yeah, I support that.
Absolutely, 100%.
I don't want to cut off those red checks, though, in order to do the 6%.
That's what I'm hearing.
I just don't
Right.
think that's advisable. We just don't. We need those instructional, there's a lot of stuff on there that I don't think we can do without, so.
Yep,
If we get additional funds, absolutely,
Yeah,
yep.
agree.
agree. I wish money grew on trees.
Yes.
I do have a money tree in my office.
kid
Don't you have
says
one?
It's not gonna help.
You mean it doesn't at yours?
It does in my house.
Is, anybody have anything else? David, do you have anything else?
I do not.
David, you
back
don't have
to
an
Steve.
update on that,
Okay, you guys
on the
let me know.
land? Does he have an update on the land?
I don't.
No, okay. We'll get that next time.
All right.
Sorry, what was
Right,
it?
thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll see you guys next week.
Hope it rains
All right.
every day.